Hi, welcome to episode 2. Today we're going to learn how live preview works in Contento and get it set up in our project. I was going to cover deploying out to production as well, but it turns out that this episode is going to be really long otherwise, so we're not going to do that. So first things first, I'm just going to go to the Contento admin panel and just remind you where we left off last time. So we have deployed our kit into Contento, got it working on our local host, which I should probably just start so that we can see it. There we go. And everything's working, but when we click preview, but it doesn't fully update. So like if I just make a change here, we don't see it update here until we press update over there. And then to see the change, we actually have to go to the front of our site, hard refresh that so that the next cache breaks and picks up the new one. Sometimes we have to do this a few times. There we go. Because the Contento API doesn't yet know that we're running in draft mode, so the cache is a bit more aggressive. So if we now come back here, we can refresh this page and it should be updating, but that's a pretty poor workflow. So what I'm going to show you now is how to enable the proper preview rather than just loading up the site and showing it to us with no interactivity. We're going to tell Contento how to communicate with the front end of our site using the Next SDK that we've got installed in our project. So the first thing we're going to do is just double check the settings. So if we go to settings up here and open visual preview, we can see that it's switched on. It's pointing at our root localhost URL, which is why we're able to see that initial preview. And we've got a preview secret, which we ought to double check is in our environment file. Now we know all that's up and running, we can come back here and go to our editor. At this point, I'm going to just briefly explain some of the things that come with all of the kits, including this basic one, which help make the live preview system work. So the first is we have two roots called draft and disable draft inside the API folder of our Next application. So the draft one very simply just enables draft mode and redirects to the correct URL. This is really important, otherwise the Next application doesn't know that we're in draft mode, and it also doesn't know what URL to show, so it just shows the root URL of the site. So at the moment, every page that we create and preview, we're going to be seeing the root of the site, which is not very helpful. And it's not going to update properly because Next isn't in draft mode. The next route, disable draft, is for switching all of this off. So later on, you'll see we get a little pop-up bubble that's coming from the SDK that says you're in preview mode and allows you to disable it and switch it off again. And that appears on the front of your site when you're running in preview mode through the Next SDK. So that's what those two routes do. You can look at them in more detail if you want, and you can also sort of read about them properly here in our documentation. The other thing that we need to have a quick look at right now is inside the Contento lib file that we have our sort of generic create client function. This has a parameter called isPreview, which allows us to tell the API whether we're in preview mode or not. I use the words draft and preview interchangeably here because Next talks about it as being draft sort of mode, and then like we think of it as preview mode, so our API thinks of it as preview mode. And then in other frameworks, it's called preview or draft, or sometimes other things. So apologies for the confusion, but draft and preview are basically the same thing in our setup that we're talking about here. So this create Contento client function that comes from our core SDK allows us to pass in an is preview property, and that has to be true or false. So when you'll see later when we start to fetch content in our sort of page files, we can tell the client whether we're in preview mode or not, and that will resolve some of the sort of caching issues. It will also allow us to fetch draft content that's not yet published, and stuff like that. Cool. So the first step when enabling live preview in Contento is to add the preview bridge component to our layout file. This enables it on every single page across our website, and it allows the Contento editor to communicate with our client application. So we're just going to put that. It would help if I could type. There we go. Just going to put that in here. And that's coming from our Next SDK. So this will be different if you're in Nuxt or Astro or anything else. Now you can see that my editor has auto completed that there's a draft mode prop required on this component. So first things first, I need to import the draft mode utility from Next. Now, there are obviously lots of documentation about how to do that in the Next website, but we can also just look at ours, and we've got the various sort of bits and pieces that you actually need here. So we just need to import draft mode from the Next headers, and then I think we just pass that. Yeah, we just need to pass whether it's enabled or not into the preview bridge. So I'm just going to copy this in here. Nice. Okay, so I didn't even need those bits. So we're passing in the draft mode to our preview bridge, and this is only one half of the setup. The other half is going to be over here in our page component. So right now, you can see we're just outputting a div with our title in it. Now, what we really need to do is make a page component. We could just make that inline here, but then it will always be static and rendered on the server at build time, and we won't be able to hydrate that with fresh data in the Contento editor so that we get that live preview experience. So we're going to make a page component over here, and I'm just going to create a new directory called components. And then inside here, probably going to call another directory called pages because I like organizing things. And I'm going to call this general page. Nice. So the first step with our general page component is we need to make it a client component. This tells Next to allow it to update on the client side and not just be a static component that's only hydrated on the server. And then we need to export default function general page. Cool. Now this is going to return, again, just to begin with, a div with our title inside it. Now we need to pass that in, and the way we do that is via, let me just find a bit in the docs. Always read the docs. Okay, the way we do that is by sending the initial content in from the server, and then we hydrate it using this use live preview hook, which I'll come on to more in a minute. So the first thing I'm going to do is add my prop here. I'm going to go back to my page component and start rendering that instead. So general page, and I need initial content equals content. Cool. Now you can see that our client has already passed the draft mode because we set that up as part of the basic starter kit. So you need to make sure you're doing that every time you use create client and you want that data to be changeable in live preview. And then you need to pass that into your client component. So we're done with page.tsx, we're done with layout, and we're just going to focus on the general page now. So import that type. Okay, so we've got our initial content in, and now we need to do something with it. So we're going to pass that initial content into the use live preview hook that comes as part of the next SDK for Contento. So we're going to do const content equals use live preview content. So we're passing the initial content into the content prop of use live preview, and we're returning the results to the content variable. So initially this looks like it just does the same thing and it's overcomplicated, but actually inside this hook we set the page up to communicate with the Contento editor automatically. So if I've got everything right, which I'm just going to double check, yep, then we should now be able to make this whole function reactive. Don't think it needs to be async. No, it doesn't. So that it updates directly from Contento. So we're going to go and test this out. So I'm just going to refresh my editor, restart live preview, and I'm going to get an error. So after a little bit of debugging, I realized what I did. I didn't read my own docs properly, and I needed to expand this returned value from use live preview. At the moment, it does only return one variable content, but in case we do more in the future, we've wrapped that so that it returns an object. Okay, so we've extracted the content from use live preview. We're outputting it here, and now in theory, this will work. And it does. So I think if I start typing, we should start seeing some updates coming through. And we do. Great. So we're going to go and just hit update on that and test that on the front of the site as well. Excellent. So we're getting our changes here. We're not getting the little preview bubble that should pop up at the moment because there's a bug in our SDK, which I do need to fix. But it does work on production, just not when you're testing on your local host. So hopefully that's shown you how all the different pieces work with the preview bridge and the use live preview hook and the general flow of data coming, from your backend when you build your page.tsx, sending it into your component, and then allowing Contento to hydrate that component live from our editor. It's a pretty cool system, and it really helps content editors if they can see their changes whilst they're editing and adding content. This does also allow you to see draft content. So if your piece of content is in draft stage inside Contento, you will still be able to preview it here. Cool. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you next time, where we'll be covering content modeling, and we're going to model out, I think, a blog post and go from there. All right. See you soon.